when Liam powered on that cracked phone and scrolled through the gallery. He realized someone had been documenting their every sleeping breath for hours before they even knew they were being watched. Liam had always loved the isolation of Pine Ridge National Park. The 3-day camping trip with his college friends, Jake, Maya, and Chloe, was supposed to be their last adventure before graduation scattered them across the country. They'd chosen a remote backcountry site, accessible only by a 2-mile hike through dense forest, specifically because they wanted to escape the crowded campgrounds closer to the main road. On their second morning, while collecting firewood about 50 yards from their camp, Liam spotted something glinting between the roots of a massive oak tree. Half buried in the damp earth was a smartphone with a severely cracked screen. The device was encased in a heavy-duty protective cover, the kind serious hikers used. "Guys, look what I found," Liam called out, holding up the phone as his friends gathered around. "Screen's totally destroyed," Jake observed, squinting at the spiderweb of cracks covering the display. "I can probably fix this enough to see if there's any contact info. The LCD underneath might still be intact. Poor bastard probably doesn't even know they lost it," Maya said. "We should turn it in to the ranger station when we head back." The thumbnail showed what looked like their campsite, but the image was dark, taken at night. The timestamp showed 2:47 a.m., just 6 hours earlier. He could make out the soft glow of their battery-powered lantern inside Maya and Chloe's tent, the distinctive blue fabric of his and Jake's adjacent shelter. He tapped on it, and his blood ran cold. The flash had been turned off, but there was just enough ambient light to reveal the outline of someone sleeping inside. The timestamp, 3:41 a.m. The ground was covered in dry leaves. The photos grew progressively bolder, closer shots, different angles, some taken from positions that would have required the photographer to crawl on their hands and knees to avoid detection. But Chloe, ever the problem solver, had already pulled out her portable charging bank and repair kit from her backpack. When she finally powered it on, the screen flickered to life, displaying a generic lock screen with no identifying information. And look, full battery. It was taken at 5:23 a.m., just as the first hints of dawn were lightening the sky. The image showed all 4 tents from an elevated position, as if the photographer had climbed a tree to get the shot. If you're going to stalk people and take creepy photos, why abandon the evidence? But what made Liam's hand shake was the timestamp. He clearly remembered waking up around 5:30 a.m. to relieve himself, and he'd made a mental note of how peaceful and quiet everything seemed. Every shadow between the trees could be hiding someone. Every rustle of leaves in the breeze sounded like footsteps. Same campsite, different angle. This one was taken from behind their tents, near the creek. The timestamp read 3:15 a.m. Then another at 3:23 a.m. This one much closer to Jake's tent, close enough that they could see the shadow of someone inside. Every snapping twig made them whirl around. Every bird call sounded like a signal. When they finally reached the parking area, Liam was shocked to see it was completely empty except for their vehicle. The photographer had been inches away from where his head lay on his pillow. In the photo, Liam looked peaceful, completely unaware of the violation taking place. And whoever was watching them was still out there, somewhere in those trees, probably taking more pictures as they stood there in terrified silence beside their car. Whoever lost this couldn't have dropped it too long ago. At the bottom, someone had written in neat handwriting, "Thanks for a lovely stay. See you next time." It took her about an hour of careful work, peeling away loose glass and applying a temporary screen protector she'd brought for her own phone. He kept glancing toward the tree line, expecting to see a figure watching them, maybe raising another phone to capture their panicked departure. He tried the call log, also empty. That's weird. It's like someone just wiped everything but didn't do a factory reset. "No passcode," Chloe announced, swiping it open. Look at the angles. Whoever took these knew exactly where to position themselves for the best shots. Like they'd been watching us set up camp. learning our layout. Liam took the phone, navigating to the contacts app. Empty. Check the photos, Maya suggested. Okay, maybe there's something there. Liam opened the gallery, and his stomach dropped. It was a photo of their tent cluster, taken from the tree line about 30 feet away. What the hell? Jake whispered, leaning closer. With trembling fingers, Liam scrolled to the next photo. The fourth photo made Maya gasp audibly. It was taken from directly outside her tent, the camera positioned maybe 2 feet from the fabric wall. This isn't possible, Chloe said, her voice shaking. We would have heard someone walking around, okay? But Liam was already scrolling through more photos, dozens of them. Someone had spent hours circling their campsite, documenting them as they slept. One image, time-stamped for 18 a.m., showed Liam's own face through the mesh window of his tent. "Okay, we need to leave," Maya said, backing away from the group. "Right now, okay?" But Jake was studying the photos more carefully. A chill ran down Liam's spine as he scrolled to the final photo. The photographer had still been there, watching, when Liam had emerged from his tent. "The phone," Chloe said suddenly. "Why leave the phone behind?" Liam felt a cold realization wash over him. Because they didn't lose it. They wanted us to find it. The forest around him, which had felt welcoming and safe just minutes before, now seemed to press in on all sides. "We're packing up now," Jake said, already moving toward their tents. As they hurriedly broke camp, Liam couldn't shake the feeling that they were still being observed. The hike back to their car felt endless. As Jake fumbled with the car keys, his hands shaking, Maya noticed something tucked under their windshield wiper. "There's something here," she said, her voice barely above a whisper. It was a printed photograph. Okay, the image showed their car in the parking lot, taken from the forest's edge. The timestamp on the photo was from 20 minutes ago while they were hiking back down the trail. They'd been watched the entire time. Liam looked back toward the trail they'd just emerged from, and for just a moment, could swear he saw a flash of light between the trees, like sunlight reflecting off a camera lens. They never reported the incident to the rangers. They never came back to Pine Ridge National Park. But sometimes, late at night, Liam still wonders who has those photos now, and where the new ones are being added to the collection. Chloe still wakes up some nights, her lips pressed tight together, terrified that if she so much as hums a single note, something deep in the darkness might answer her back. The divorce papers had been finalized for 3 weeks when Chloe decided she needed to disappear. Not permanently, just long enough to remember who she was before the marriage, before the fighting, before everything fell apart. The hike to the campsite took her 2 hours through dense forest, where the canopy blocked out most of the sky. But muscle memory kicked in, and soon she had her tent pitched and a fire crackling in the stone ring some previous camper had built. The forest around her was alive with sound, owls calling, branches creaking, the distant splash of something moving through the creek. For the first time in months, she felt truly alone, and it was exactly what she needed. When she finally reached a small clearing beside a babbling creek, she felt something inside her chest loosen for the first time in months. She had always found peace in the wilderness, and the remote campsite in Oregon's Cascade Range seemed perfect. No cell service, no other campers for miles. Just her and the towering Douglas firs that stretched endlessly in every direction. No response came back except the continued rustle of wind through the branches. Or perhaps another camper was out there, someone who'd heard her whistling and decided to respond. The thought of not being as alone as she'd believed was somehow more unsettling than reassuring. Amazing Grace, slow and reverent, the way her father had whistled it when he worked in his garden. The melody came back to her, but it was wrong in ways that made her skin crawl. Some notes were too sharp, others too flat, and there was a breathy quality to it, as if whatever was making the sound wasn't quite getting enough air. She arrived at the unmarked trail just after noon on a gray October day. The sound had come from her left, maybe 50 yards out, where the firelight couldn't penetrate the thick undergrowth. The flames cast dancing shadows that made the surrounding trees seem to shift and move. Once, she could have sworn she heard breathing just outside her tent, slow and deliberate, but when she listened intently, it was nothing but her own racing heartbeat, just an odd acoustic effect of the terrain. After 20 minutes of silence, she convinced herself she'd imagined it. The beam cut through the darkness, illuminating tree trunks and undergrowth, but nothing moved. Nothing that shouldn't be moving anyway. She built up the fire early and kept it burning bright. The melody was grotesquely distorted now, some notes sliding unnaturally into others, the rhythm stuttering and wrong. And underneath it was something else, a sound like branches scraping together or fingernails on bark. The moment she realized what she was doing, she stopped. For just an instant, she thought she saw something pale move behind a thick fir tree about 20 feet away. Not walking. Something wrong about the way it moved. Too fluid, too quick. This time, she was determined not to whistle. She'd read a book, drank some tea, maybe write in her journal about the bizarre echo phenomenon she'd experienced. Her heart hammered so hard she could feel it in her throat. The voice had sounded wrong, like someone trying to speak underwater. It had been her exact tone, note for note, but there was something wrong with it. She sat beside the fire with her back against a tree, flashlight in one hand and the heaviest camping knife she had brought in the other. Every shadow seemed to pulse with movement. Once, around 3 in the morning, she heard her grandmother's version of Fur Elise drifting through the trees, but now it sounded like it was being whistled by something that did quite understand how human mouths worked. No owls, no insects, no wind through the branches. Even the creek seemed quieter. The pitch was slightly off, like an old radio not quite tuned to the right station, and even started going to therapy to deal with what her counselor called acute anxiety following her divorce. She never mentioned a thing in the woods that learned to whistle her songs back to her. Setting up camp took longer than expected. Her hands had grown soft during the marriage. David had always insisted on handling anything outdoors while she focused on her career, and in the silence that follows, she swears she can hear something outside her window, waiting patiently for her to make just one sound so it can try to copy her voice again. As darkness crept through the trees, Chloe pulled on her fleece jacket and settled beside the fire with a cup of instant coffee. Without thinking, she began to whistle, like something was listening, waiting for her next move. It was an old tune her grandmother used to hum while cooking, Fur Elise by Beethoven. Toe simplified into something haunting and melancholy. Instead, she fed the fire until it blazed high and bright, creating a larger circle of light around her camp. Every shadow seemed to hide something. Every sound made her jump. When she finally crawled into her tent around midnight, she left the rainfly partially open so she could see the fire, and she kept the flashlight clutched in her hand. The melody drifted out into the darkness beyond her small circle of firelight, and for a moment, everything felt perfect. Then, from somewhere in the trees, the same melody drifted back. Chloe's whistling died on her lips. She sat perfectly still, straining to listen. "Hello?" she called out, her voice smaller than she'd intended. The forest swallowed her words. Chloe tried to rationalize it. Maybe it was an echo, though she'd never heard of an echo that could bounce back so perfectly after such a delay. She poked at the fire with a stick, sending sparks spiraling up into the darkness. Then she began whistling again, a different tune this time. The response came faster this time, and closer, maybe 30 yards out, just beyond a massive fallen log she could barely make out in the darkness. Chloe's hand shook as she reached for the flashlight in her backpack. "I know someone's out there," she called, trying to inject authority into her voice. "This isn't funny." The silence that followed felt heavy, expectant. She didn't whistle again that night. Sleep came in fragments. Each time she started to drift off, a small sound would snap her awake. A twig snapping, leaves rustling, the creek gurgling over stones. Dawn brought relief. In daylight, her fears seemed foolish. She made breakfast over the rekindled fire and even managed to laugh at herself. Echo, she decided firmly. But as evening approached again, the anxiety crept back. The plan lasted until just after sunset. Without conscious thought, she found herself humming under her breath just a few bars of Blackbird by the Beatles. The response came immediately, so close it seemed to be right at the edge of the firelight. Chloe grabbed her flashlight and swept it across the perimeter of her camp. "What do you want?" she whispered, then immediately regretted speaking at all. The whistling stopped abruptly. In the silence that followed, Chloe became aware of something she should have noticed before. All the normal forest sounds had ceased. Then, in a voice that might have been human if you heard it from far away, something called her name. Chloe. It came from directly behind her tent. She spun around, flashlight beam dancing wildly, but saw only empty forest. She didn't sleep that night. At first light, she broke camp with shaking hands and hiked out as fast as her exhausted legs could carry her. Chloe never went camping alone again. Chloe, she moved to a different city, changed jobs, but sometimes, late at night in her apartment, she catches herself about to hum an old tune. And in the silence that follows, she swears she can hear something outside her window, waiting patiently for her to make just one sound, so it can try to copy her voice again. Sometimes the people who claim they're there to help you are the ones you should fear the most. Maya learned this lesson on a cold October night in the Cascade Mountains, but by then, it was already too late. Maya had been hiking the Pacific Crest Trail for 3 days when the fog rolled in like a living thing, swallowing the familiar markers she'd been following. The dense gray wall descended so quickly that within minutes, she couldn't see more than 5 feet in any direction. Maya had to admit the truth. She was completely lost. Her GPS had died that morning. The battery drained faster than expected in the cold, and now panic crept up her throat like bile, and Maya's lightweight sleeping bag would end to be enough if she had to spend the night exposed on the mountainside. He was tall, maybe in his 50s, with graying hair and kind eyes that crinkled at the corners. Everything about him seemed normal, even reassuring. She needed shelter, and she needed it soon. Happens more often than you'd think. This fog can be treacherous up here. I'm Ranger Mitchell. That would be amazing. Thank you so much. He extended a gloved hand, which Maya shook gratefully. Just doing my job. Follow me and stay close. The fog was thinner here, allowing Maya to see the basic outline of what was indeed an emergency campsite. A fire pit surrounded by large stones, a small wooden lean-to, and a metal bear box for food storage. Easy to lose each other in this soup. It was rustic, but adequate. This is perfect. I can't thank you enough. She'd taken what she thought was a shortcut back to the main trail. But after 2 hours of stumbling through increasingly unfamiliar terrain, Maya noticed he moved with the confidence of someone who knew these woods intimately, never hesitating at what appeared to be decision points in the trail. She looked around the clearing more carefully, her previous gratitude now replaced by unease. A faded piece of fabric caught on a branch, red like the shoe. Maybe a family had gotten lost years ago and stayed here. Maybe the child had outgrown the shoe and it had simply been left behind. The scratches could be from animals, the fabric from old camping gear, and near the lean-to, partially hidden by fallen leaves, what looked like claw marks gouged deep into the wood. The temperature was dropping fast. October nights in the Cascades could kill you if you weren't prepared long enough to know every trail, every campsite, every place where hikers go missing. That's when she heard the voice. And then Maya saw him, Ranger Mitchell, standing perfectly still at the tree line, his flashlight pointed down at something in his hands. When dawn finally broke and the fog began to lift, she packed her gear with shaking hands and consulted her backup compass. Every sound from the surrounding woods made her jump. The snap of a twig, the rustle of leaves, the distant call of an owl that didn't quite sound right. When she reached a trailhead, Maya went straight to the ranger station to report her experience and ask about Ranger Mitchell. Our only ranger who matches that description was David Mitchell, but he died in these woods 15 years ago during a search and rescue operation. You look like you could use some help. You should be comfortable enough here for the night. Maya's first instinct was relief. Maybe Ranger Mitchell had come back to check on her, but something made her stay quiet, watching from inside her tent. 7 years old, red sneakers, last seen on a day hike with her parents. We searched for weeks, but never found her. Ranger Mitchell refused to give up. When she finished, the ranger was quiet for a long moment. He kept going out alone, even after we called off the official search. One night, he just ... never came back. Sometimes, late at night, she wondered who else he might be helping find their way to safety. Mitchell stood there for what felt like hours, but was probably only minutes, completely motionless except for his head, which slowly turned as if scanning the campsite. In the fog and darkness, his face was hidden beneath the brim of his hat, but Maya could feel his gaze sweep over her tent. I got turned around in this fog. I've been lost for hours. Maya spun around, her heart hammering. Through the fog emerged a figure in a dark green ranger uniform, complete with a distinctive hat and badge. Thank God, Maya breathed. A child's shoe, maybe size 10 or 11, with cartoon characters on the side that had faded from weather and time. Maya picked it up, turning it over in her hands. The sole was worn, and there were scuff marks on the toe that suggested active play. But here she was, at a real campsite instead of shivering on some exposed ridge. So she pushed the thought away and began setting up her tent. The ranger nodded sympathetically. Too far to make it back safely in this weather, especially with the night coming on. He folded the map and tucked it into his jacket pocket. But I know a place. There's an emergency campsite about half a mile from here. It's got a fire pit, some basic shelter. You can wait out the fog there, and I'll guide you back to the trail in the morning, Maya. I was trying to get back to the PCT when this rolled in. You're about 4 miles off the main trail, Mitchell said, consulting what looked like a worn topographical map. Relief flooded through Maya. Ranger Mitchell smiled. They walked in single file through the fog, Mitchell's flashlight beam creating a weak tunnel of visibility ahead of them. How long have you been working these mountains? Maya asked, partly to make conversation and partly to calm her nerves. Long time, Mitchell replied without turning around. Something in his tone made Maya's stomach tighten. Before she could think too much about it, they emerged into a small clearing. Here we are, Mitchell announced. Maya dropped her pack and surveyed the site. No problem at all. I'll be back first thing in the morning to guide you out. Mitchell tipped his hat. You stay safe now. He disappeared back into the fog so quickly that Maya wondered if she'd imagined the whole encounter. It was while she was gathering wood for a fire that Maya found it. Nestled against one of the stones surrounding the fire pit was a small red sneaker. A cold weight settled in Maya's stomach. What was a child's shoe doing at an emergency campsite miles from any established trail? That's when she noticed other things, scratches on the trees at about child height. Maya's hands began to shake as she built her fire. She told herself there were logical explanations, but deep down, she knew she was lying to herself. As darkness fell and the fog thickened, Maya huddled close to her fire, the child's shoe sitting on the ground beside her like an accusation. It was just after midnight when she saw the light, a single beam cutting through the fog at the edge of the clearing. The light moved slowly around the perimeter of the campsite, never coming into the clearing proper, but circling it like a predator. He was holding another shoe, small, red, a perfect match for the one Maya had found. Maya's breath caught in her throat. Then, as silently as he had appeared, he melted back into the fog. Maya didn't sleep that night. She sat rigid in her tent, listening to every sound, waiting for the light to return. It took her 6 hours of hard hiking, but she found her way back to the PCT. The ranger on duty, a young woman with concerned eyes, shook her head slowly. "Ma'am, I've been working this district for 5 years, and we don't have anyone named Mitchell." Maya felt the blood drain from her face. "What kind of search and rescue?" The ranger's expression grew grim. "A little girl went missing." Maya reached into her pack and pulled out the small red shoe. The ranger's face went white. "Where did you find this?" Maya told her story, watching the ranger's expression grow more troubled with each detail. "Ma'am," she finally said, "there is no emergency campsite in the area you described. We've never had one there." Maya drove home that day, but she never forgot that clearing in the fog, or the patient way Ranger Mitchell had circled her tent, and she wondered how many other small shoes were scattered through those woods, waiting to be found. And with that final story, we pull back from the abyss. For now, tales of ordinary lives brushing against the extraordinary, the terrifying, the unexplainable, from the shadow that mimics to the voice that calls from an empty house. We've seen tonight how thin the veil between our reality and a much darker one can be. These stories are not just fiction. They are born from real experiences, whispered in hushed tones, and shared to remind us that we are not always alone. And that's the most chilling thought, isn't it? Perhaps one of tonight's stories reminded you of something that happened to you, or to someone you know. A strange occurrence you've tried to forget. A noise in the night you rationalized away. A figure you saw for just a second. The details of your own brush with the darkness are what give this channel life. I invite you to leave your own story in the comments below. Let us know what you've seen in the shadows. If these stories sent a shiver down your spine, show your support by hitting that like button. It helps these tales reach others who need a reminder to check their locks at night. And if you haven't already, make sure you subscribe and click the notification bell. We have so many more stories to share, and you won't want to be left in the dark. Until next time, remember that you are not afraid of being alone. You are afraid of the bone-deep certainty that you are not.